Richard Roose was a cook. He was employed by the household of Bishop John Fisher, a respected religious figure in the church hierarchy of Tudor England. In May of 1531, while working in the bishop's kitchen, Roose committed an act that shocked the entire kingdom. He deliberately laced the evening porridge with poison, a silent and deadly act of malice that would result into deaths and leave many others gravely ill. In the world of Tudor England, there were few crimes more heinous and terrifying than that of poisoning. Not only was it an insidious and cowardly act, but it was also viewed as an offense against the bonds of trust and the sacred duties within a household. In a society where loyalty and obedience were paramount, to poison one's employer or members of their family was seen as an unforgivable betrayal. When news of the crime reached King Henry VIII, he was immediately horrified. And given the king's well-known proclivities towards paranoia, this wasn't just a matter of anger. It tapped into a deep-seated fear of sudden illness and unexpected demise. Rushing to protect his own household, he wasted no time in passing a special act of Parliament, effectively declaring that from that day forward, the crime of poisoning would be considered a new form of treason. And that wasn't all. The act also established a new and terrifying punishment for those found guilty. They would be boiled alive. This unprecedented and brutal sentence was a clear indication of how seriously the king took this threat. Boiling alive was not part of common English law. Capital offenses at the time usually involved execution by hanging, drawing and quartering, or more rarely, the death penalty. By creating this new and gruesome method of execution, Henry VIII wanted to send a message, a warning that would resonate throughout his kingdom. The very air in London was thick with fear as word spread about the new law and the fate that awaited Rose. The place chosen for this first ever execution was Smithfield, a bustling market square in the heart of the city. On April 5, 1531, a massive copper cauldron was erected in the square. It was filled with water and heated over a roaring fire, creating a scene that was both grotesque and terrifying. People gathered from all around to witness this public spectacle. At the appointed hour, Richard Roose was led from his prison cell to the waiting cauldron, his face pale with fear, his hands bound behind his back. As he approached the structure, the crowd fell silent, the murmurings and speculations ceasing as if in reverence to the gravity of the impending event. The accused was given a chance to make a final statement, a last-minute confession, or perhaps an attempt to justify his actions. But what Rose said, if anything, was lost to the crowd, drowned out by the crackling of the fire and the ominous rumble of the crowd. He was then stripped naked, and without any further ceremony, he was pushed into the scalding water. The crowd gasped, a wave of sound rising and falling as they watched the struggle of the doomed man. At first, he thrashed wildly, his limbs flailing in the air, the rope that bound his wrists digging into his skin. But as the initial shock wore off, his movements became more subdued, his strength ebbing away like the water in the cauldron. This was not a quick death. It was a drawn-out and excruciating demise, a grim parody of the slow-acting poison he had used. As the minutes dragged on, the crowd grew hushed, their morbid fascination overcoming their revulsion. They watched in grim silence as the man's struggles gradually faded, replaced by a horrifying stillness. But even in the face of such a ghastly spectacle, there were those who felt uneasy. Some averted their eyes, unable to stomach the scene. Others whispered prayers for the condemned man, their voices soft but fervent. A few, however, seemed transfixed, their gazes locked onto the cauldron, eager spectators of a macabre show. It must have been an agonizing end, a torment both physical and psychological. The burning heat of the water seeping into his skin, the chilling realization of his fate, and the suffocating grip of fear as he slowly slipped into the cold embrace of death. It was a fate worse than a quick death, a fate that denied him peace even in death. Yet this was precisely the intention behind this unprecedented punishment. It was not just a means to carry out the sentence, but a theatrical display, a grim performance designed to shock and deter. The executioners, too, knew the gravity of the event. They carried out their grim duty with a sense of solemnity, their movements precise and efficient. Their faces, however, were impassive, betraying none of the horror that the spectacle might have evoked in them. After what seemed like an eternity, but was likely no more than half an hour, the man in the cauldron was pronounced dead. His body, now lifeless, was fished out of the water, pulled from the depths by rough hands that had no qualms about tickling the remains of the condemned man. His naked body, a pallid shade in the daylight, was then cut down from the hook. The crowd, their morbid curiosity now seemingly satiated, began to disperse. Some hurried away, eager to escape the haunting memory of what they had just witnessed. Others lingered, morbid curiosity pulling them back to the gruesome scene. For them, this was more than just a punishment. It was a spectacle, a macabre theater of cruelty that had become an essential part of their day. The story of this dreadful event didn't end with the death of Richard Roose. It reverberated through the corridors of power, shaping the narrative of a kingdom on edge. Henry VIII, the architect of this brutal justice, seemed almost satisfied with the outcome, his need for immediate action assuaged. Yet the Act of Parliament he had hastily passed continued to loom, a constant reminder of a crime that had shaken the very foundations of his court. The execution in Smithfield was supposed to serve as a warning, a stark reminder of the dire consequences that awaited those who dared to violate the sanctity of the king's court. However, as the days turned into weeks and months, the chilling echo of the boiling water seemed to fade from the public consciousness. The novelty of the punishment, unique and terrible as it was, appeared to wear off, leaving behind a sense of unease and unanswered questions. Had the spectacle been too horrifying, too traumatic to be openly discussed? Or had the king's paranoia gotten the better of him? The swift and brutal punishment overshadowing the actual need for such drastic measures? While the execution of Richard Roose sent tremors through the kingdom, it also left a lasting impact on the legal and judicial system of Tudor England. The Act of Parliament that created the offence of poisoning and the unique punishment of boiling alive was a radical step. It revealed the extent of the king's paranoia and his willingness to experiment with the boundaries of justice. Yet this extreme measure remained an isolated incident, a one-off occurrence that was never repeated. The question is why? Was it simply because the king's paranoia subsided after the dramatic public execution? Or were there underlying factors that influenced this decision? Perhaps there was a collective realization that the punishment, while shocking, was too extreme to be invoked regularly, even in cases of high treason. Whatever the reason, the fact that this unprecedented act was never repeated underscores the unique and terrifying nature of Richard Rose's punishment. The execution of Richard Roose remains a haunting episode in history, a testament to the extremes that the human mind can reach when faced with fear, paranoia, and the quest for absolute control. His death, a grim spectacle of pain and suffering, serves as a stark reminder of a time when the boundaries between justice and cruelty were blurred. As we delve deeper into the psyche of Henry VIII, and the social norms of Tudor England, we begin to understand the motivations behind such a horrifying ordeal. The king's obsession with his health and well-being, coupled with his distrustful nature, created a breeding ground for suspicion and fear. The crime of poisoning, seen as a treacherous act against the sacred bond of trust within a household, was met with an equally treacherous response. Boiling alive, while extreme, was seen as a necessary evil, a means to ensure the safety of the king and his court. It was a way to eliminate the fear of unseen enemies, to punish the guilty without leaving any room for doubt. Moreover, this unusual punishment served as a warning, a gruesome spectacle meant to deter others from even contemplating such acts of treachery. The execution in Smithfield was not just a means to punish the guilty. It was a public display of power, a demonstration of the king's absolute authority and his willingness to go to any lengths to protect himself and his kingdom. Yet despite the shock and fear that it may have initially caused, the execution of Richard Roose ultimately failed to quell the underlying issues that plagued the Tudor court. The paranoia, the fear of poisoning, and the quest for absolute control continued, leaving behind a legacy of suspicion and distrust. Richard Roose's death, a tragic and horrifying event, serves as a potent symbol of the dangers of unchecked fear and the dark extremes of justice. His story is a cautionary tale, a reminder of the lengths to which fear can drive us and the importance of balance and restraint in the pursuit of justice.